experiment. So if no one really knows what Twilio is, we are a cloud communications platform that enables companies to build, scale, and operate on any communications experience utilizing APIs. So what does this mean? What this means is that with Twilio, you're able to really think about embedding communications within your applications, your websites, and really this enables you to think about how you communicate with your customers, how you engage with them, and really this is going to inform your go-to-market strategy. My colleague Nikki highlighted and designed this, which was really great. And it's like all the different components you need to build a really functioning, successful startup. And at Twilio, we play, or the areas we believe we can add value is where we can help. So for example, when you think of security, for example, if you're building a fintech startup, Twilio has a product called Authy to add push notifications and 2FA. You can use Twilio to integrate with your payment platforms and send receipts. Twilio also has a programmable contact center platform called Flex that can help you augment your support team's capabilities. But today, what we're going to be focusing on is specifically around customer engagement, which is marketing and communication channels. So for example, when you get a text from a favorite food delivery service or an email from an e-commerce shop, these are the types of communications that could be powered by Twilio. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these channels for customer engagement. As you can see, this is the full Twilio stack with lots of products that some people may know or you may not know at all. I think a lot of people have come to know Twilio by their channel APIs, which are the most relevant for our discussion today. You can see this in the section in blue, a light blue. And this is SMS, voice, email, chat, video, WhatsApp, and Facebook. But there's so many more solutions like Studio, which is a drag and drop editor. We'll talk a bit more later. Flex, a programmable contact center. And these are the types of channels that allow you to really leverage the Twilio super network, which includes things like phone numbers and short codes, and connect to the channels that are most relevant to your business. So what is Twilio Startups? So just a bit about Twilio and my team and Twilio Startups in general. Whilst you might be in the process of launching your private beta or building your MVP or just writing your idea on the back of a napkin, in the case of Jeff and the Twilio founders in 2007, they started Twilio on the back of a pizza box. And essentially, Twilio Startups and our team is here to really support founders with support in the form of credits, technical expertise, as well as commercial expertise, and providing you with the support you need to launch your business. At the end of the presentation, I'll also give you a bit more information about the program, as well as information and resources. But I think what I would love to impart to you today is the same way we now think in like the startup world and in business, we now realize the importance of design and design thinking. I would also love for you to think about communications thinking or customer engagement thinking, and really embedding this within your products as you're looking to scale or build or grow your businesses. And in terms of just speaking of resources about our program, we're also here to help during these difficult times. So if you sign up to twilio.org, which is our social impact arm, and you're working on a social impact startup, they will also be able to provide you with impact access credit. Or if you're in healthcare or education or nonprofit, we have programs to help you implement video to communicate better remotely. And Twilio is just partnering with a lot of fantastic nonprofits and communities. If you're interested in learning more about how .org works with social impact communities, I can also provide links to this as well at the end of the workshop if it's of interest. So moving on, we're going to be now focusing on how do you go about differentiating your startup through customer engagement? So this is really the question at hand. And whilst we understand that all startups are different, creating a memorable, valuable experience for your customers is the key to really winning as any business. I think now more than ever, it's important to boost your customer engagement strategy to make your startup stand out, as we all try to support each other as much as possible. I think flipping the coin on its head, I think we also appreciate as customers, we have a very high set of expectations when it comes to customer engagement. If you send the wrong message to someone, you can negatively impact their customer experience. But if you get it right, you have the capacity to delight the customer and they'll love you and your product. Essentially, customer engagement is the emotional connection and that rapport between a customer and a brand. Highly engaged customers tend to buy more, promote more, and demonstrate more loyalty to your brand. So let's look at differentiation today. So in the startup world, we've come to know that there's many different ways you can differentiate your startup and make it stand out. Typically, it's been technology, patents and moats, price. Either you've got a good price point that's unique, or you're able to scale, or you've got a direct to consumer business that gets rid of the middleman, or you've got a new type of innovative product or solution, a new category or brand. It's really important when you're thinking about like your USP and your special sauce to think what will be definitively what makes your startup succeed and give you almost the type of competitive advantage. And a lot of the time we tend to overcompensate on the tech, and tech is becoming increasingly democratized, especially when we look at the likes of low code or no code. And when we're looking at like defensibility and we're looking at price, it's like, have you disrupted the supply chain? Can you make something cheaper? And whilst all of these are very compelling cases for differentiation, one of probably the most interesting ways you can differentiate your startup is also customer engagement. If you can really build a successful business that provides value to your customers consistently and provide a high level of customer engagement, then you can really leverage customer engagement as a means to differentiate your business. We know that sending the wrong message can negatively impact your business. And as a founder, you have the opportunity to really, from scratch, create a business that has the ethos and the culture that really drives fantastic customer experience and engagement by creating compelling emotional connections. So, how big is this opportunity? So, I'd like to ask a question, which is, what percentage of consumers are currently annoyed with communications from businesses? Please feel free to pop it in the chat. Just going to leave this question open for 5 to 10 seconds. If no one knows the answer to that or no one has guessed, it would be 94% of customers are annoyed by the communications that they receive from companies. So this is via SMS, email, whatever channel we're talking about. It's frustrating. In most instances, it's irrelevant. So the main complaints were that they were not being served content that was relevant, 56%. They didn't remember opting in ever to receive such communications, 41%. Or they were being contacted on the wrong channel, 33%. And the wrong message at the wrong time on the wrong channel results in irrelevant communications which damage a brand's reputation. No. Interestingly, afternoons have been the preferred contact time for customers, and only 13% of consumers prefer to be contacted in the evening. The key thing I want you to take away from this is businesses, startups, you can earn consumer trust and loyalty by delivering relevant content via consumers' preferred channels at the right time. So what can you do as a startup founder? In business and in life, you always need to have empathy for others. You have the opportunity as you're building and crafting a startup to build for the new normal and create really strong customer communications within your startup. At Twilio, we have a set of values which we call Twilio Magic. And one of my favorite values is always wearing the customer's shoes. And in times of uncertainty, I think this stands to be the case even more so about really taking the time to understand deeply and intuitively if you are addressing your customers' needs and problems from their perspective, not from your perspective. The goal is always to earn trust through every interaction because that is how you build up credibility and trust, which ends up building eventually brand loyalty. So if we go through a typical customer engagement lifecycle, you can see these are all the different touch points. And there are many different ways we interact with our customers. When you look at the customer engagement lifecycle, you usually start with marketing. How can you raise awareness and pique your customers' interests? We then move on to sales. How can you make your product more valuable to your customer? We move on to delivery. How is your product or service or solution received by the customer? And then importantly, support. How can you best help them navigate any challenges or mitigate any challenges they might potentially have? Each stage requires you as the founder to think about how you want to communicate, one, and two, through which channel do you want to communicate? And it's all about creating powerful connections. Customer engagement is more than just communicating with your customers, it's the emotional resonance between your company and your customers. Sentiments which strongly influence buying decisions. Customers who actively engage with a business tend to be more loyal and will ultimately choose to spend their money supporting the brands and the startups that they love. What you are really doing is creating connections between people. I'm sure you can think of so many examples in your personal life where you've purchased something because you had a great experience. Even last week, when I had a box shipped to me that was lost in transit, the company made it very easy for me to get a refund via chat. They knew my tracking number based on my phone number. It was a seamless experience, and they've given me that assurance. So, what does that mean? It means that I would very likely purchase from them now, knowing how simple and intuitive and just easy it was in the sense of being able to communicate with them. So, now we're going to be thinking about communication channels. As a founder, you need to embrace an omni-channel approach and create a seamless experience across multiple communication channels, making it really easy for your customers to customize where they want to be heard and how they want to be heard. How do you go about creating these connections? As a founder, in the same way I discussed earlier about, design thinking, communications and customer engagement thinking is something you need to think as you're building and crafting your startup from the ground up. So this is just a communication channel stats at a glance. I'm just going to leave this up here for a minute just to look at, the writing around the page. And it's just a couple stats that will speak to customer engagement and communication channels. I think what you'll notice as you're looking at this is that between the influx of channels and ever-changing consumer preferences, businesses can be challenged to keep up and meet the customer's expectations. However, with a focused and deliberate approach, businesses can reap the rewards of effective communication. A consumer's channel preference is largely influenced by the urgency of the message. The majority of consumers consider change of plans, delivery or arrival notifications, and appointment reminders as urgent messages. So this is just a few high-level stats you're seeing on this slide that just, I think, will contextualize the importance of communication and customer engagement and what it means for the businesses or startups that you are building. So now we're going to look at what communication medium is essential to your life. So here on the left-hand side, we've got countries, and then the mediums and modes of communication. And then on the right-hand side, we have overall looking at like a generational breakdown in terms of different types of generations and their preferences in terms of communication as a medium. Now, to decide on what channels you want to start with, this depends on your business. And it's really important for you to understand that when you look at your business, you've got people across generations and borders. A lot of people prefer email and SMS together for their communications. So these are the main channels we're going to focus on today. You really have to understand through segmentation the demographics of your audience and tailor your communications to match this. Research has highlighted that younger generations are open to more channels and higher frequency of communication, but they want more control and personalization. In terms of best practices, you really need to ensure you're not treating every customer the same. While generations have specific preferences, we are in the time of extreme personalization. So getting communications right on behalf of your consumers should be the goal. Let customers identify what communications they want, when they want them, in order to build a lasting, compelling relationship. Before, you'll notice I spoke about when to send messages and the focus on urgency. As you can see on this slide, where the communication you're sending as a startup or as a business is urgent in nature, SMS will be preferred. Email as a medium of communication is more so for archival communication. So if we put ourselves in the customer's shoes and think of the experience you want them to have, what's the impact if they don't receive a message for 4 or 5 minutes? What about if they need to search for a receipt next week? Thinking about your commercial use case will then help you think along the lines of message, urgency versus archival, will then help you determine the best fit. You can start by plotting your communications on a chart like this to see where they fall, moving from urgent notifications on SMS towards emails that have to be archived. I think the essence of what I'm trying to get to at the core today is that you have to embrace different channels for different purposes. Consumers have varying reasons for different channels and want businesses to be able to adapt. It's no longer enough to know channel preferences of your customers. You now need to map the power of each channel to the type of communication you're sending them. Consider the urgency of the message when selecting the channel you send it through. Be clear about what communications are urgent. Don't abuse channels that customers prioritize for immediate needs. And as I said before, embrace an omni-channel approach and make it extremely easy for customers to customize where they want to be reached. I'm sure you all know through personal experience that customers prefer experiences where they can control the frequency and channel when and where they hear from you. If you reach customers on the right channel and at the right time, they are far more likely to reward you by purchasing more or leaving a positive review. So we've agreed, urgency and archival equals fantastic customer engagement. Again, this is just an overview of what would be a life cycle journey or the right time to use SMS as opposed to email. And it would be for like a ride hailing type of startup if they were leveraging an app, for example. When you then go about mapping out your experience and different touch points to see how they work together to form one customer experience, you can see how a combination of urgency, which is SMS, and archival emails leads to better customer engagement. So for a simple example, you take a delivery app, the customer places the order, they get an email, which they can reference or audit later. But when the rider leaves the restaurant, the customer gets order updates via text because these are more urgent in nature and more timely given that you're hungry. And then of course, a receipt at which you can have to audit. It's part of your inventory and you can utilize it later for any additional purposes that you might need. So this is just a quick notification channels consideration cheat sheet, sorry. So this is another great resource for thinking about different kinds of notifications. On this cheat sheet, you can see, unsurprisingly, urgent messages have higher open rates. SMS has a 98% open rate. But remember, not all of your communications are urgent. Email has a much lower open rate, but you can include more content and reference it more easily later. You'll also want to consider other things like this if it needs to be a two-way conversation. So WhatsApp, for example. What channels your audience is already using and what kind of opting settings are necessary as well, naturally, when you think about compliance. So in terms of, best practices as a founder, you're really trying to craft the experience for your customers. So you want to adhere to best practices. It sounds obvious at times, but you really need to ensure that you get the right permission to contact them. The bottom line is if you aren't sure that you have the right permission, don't message them until you do get it. And you'll want to check your list. As your startup scales, it's tempting to think that a longer list is better, but what you really want is quality. So make sure you clean your lists, be it for SMS or for email, regularly remove inactive users, check spelling of emails, the subject line, the validity of phone numbers, and finally, you control the frequency. Every business varies and some customer journeys require so much more communication than others, but always aim to try and start with less, I think, and then add on if needed. How often you send is just as important as what you send. So as we said earlier, the right channel at the right time. This is what you need to be thinking about. And this is the muscle I really want you to think about developing as you think of communications, customer engagement, your go-to-market strategy. How are you factoring these things? How are you thinking about them? Businesses that communicate using the right frequency and channels enjoy higher consumer goodwill. When you communicate clearly and reach customers on the right channel at the right time, they're more likely to reward you by purchasing a more positive review or visiting your website, around 42%. 75% of customers or consumers have rewarded businesses that communicate in the right way and in the manner that they prefer, i.e., visiting the website, making a purchase, having a positive impression. So as you're scaling your startup or scale up that you're currently in, think about ways that you're trying to build and how you want your customers to experience your business, especially at the early stage. I think your initial customer engagement strategy is so fundamental to your go-to market strategy, which will help you build momentum for the future. And although it doesn't seem important, communications and customer engagement for an early stage startup is what will help you A, define who your customers are, and B, will help you to hopefully achieve product market fit. The startups that really get communications and customer engagement spot on are more likely to hit product market fit faster. And by default, they will be able to scale and grow their business quicker. I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a really quick case study. So I'm going to get through this quite quickly. PetDesk is a bit of a later stage startup than many of you here today. They raised a Series B last year. They launched in California in 2013. They help facilitate communication between thousands of pet care providers in the US and Canada, over 5 million pet parents, by giving providers a streamlined way of communicating health service reminders, appointment requests, and confirmations. I think this is a compelling case study today, not because anyone's building a pet-based startup, but more so just looking at how they've leveraged as a B2B business, varying channels to engage with their customers and to engage with their B2B customers and B2C customers. So pet providers being B2B, B2C being pet parents. When PetDesk adds new channels, they are actually differentiating the customer engagement experience in real time for the thousands of small businesses at once. When we spoke with their VP of product, the key thing for their differentiation in terms of customer engagement was centered on making sure they put health-related communications first. According to their VP of product, they were able to differentiate themselves from their competitors by prioritizing the pet's health, not bombarding their clients with marketing messages. And this is a great example of empathy and understanding your customers and thinking about the frequency by which you send or communicate. With this strategy in place, PetDesk was able to have an 80% open rate for health-related emails, compared to the global average email open rate of 14.5%. And, PetDesk recognized that there was an opportunity specifically for SMS, text messaging. While sending one-way notifications, 33% of pet parents were already responding to communications via text, and they wanted a way to enhance the experience and turn one-way notifications into two-way notifications. So we come back to this slide that I showed you earlier. It would seem that these health-related communications definitely fall on the urgent side and could be better served to their users via a more immediate channel, such as SMS. And so as a result, PetDesk went on to implement a two-way interaction with providers and pet parents via text to make communications better. So they transitioned from one-way to two-way and boosting their overall customer engagement. The key question is as a takeaway, how did they go about doing this? I think startups can learn from this process. First, they personalized their channels. They had two use cases, sorry. Those who downloaded a PetDesk app and those who didn't. To address both cases, they would use push notifications for app users and emails for non-app users. And for the new two-way messages, they started with a small alpha test and had a few clinics try it out before rolling it out to a wider audience. So just simple A/B testing. Third, they were mindful of frequency. This launched amid the pandemic, so they actually increased the frequency of communications because during this period of uncertainty, sharing as much information as possible is much more critical. When we talk about building the new normal, everything is new and untested. In addition to talking about how you communicate with your customers, you want to think about communication channels that help your customers as they practice, for example, social distancing, or depending on really what part of the world you're in. PetDesk was able to use email and the free two-way messaging via SMS to provide policy updates on touchless visits, and later added a beta program to use video for telemedicine calls. So just as an overview of their results, they were able to drive 60% of appointments with digital reminders and increase their daily email volume tenfold to deliver COVID-19 alerts. What began with hundreds of practices using two-way messaging features to support clinic visits doubled in 2 days, literally, as their team offered the service for free to help clinics respond quickly. Just to add to that as well, two-way traffic jumped 70% as providers worked to communicate with their clients. And moreover, I think what was really compelling about this case study is that they heard stories about clinics rolling out red carpets and putting up stanchion signs and facilitating two-way messaging for pickups and drop-off. So these are just some of the things that you can see in terms of the experience and really tailoring it to the customer situation. Fundamentally, what I'm trying to allude to at the core of everything is being focused on the customer, customer obsessed, thinking about customer engagement and how your communications fits into this. As I said before, you want to really be thinking about building experiments. So, taking away from the case study, start building, prototyping customer engagement experiences. Think about the simplest version of what you want to create, make it even simpler, and just think about what you're trying to communicate or convey via the right channel and the message you're trying to send. Test. Find alpha users, other startup founders, early adopters, friends in your demographic. Be upfront and straight, and think about the fact that this is new and you're looking to figure out the kinks, the bugs, and the issues that you can solve. And finally, always ask for feedback. Send your alpha users surveys, larger surveys if needed. Make time for one-for-one calls with the customers to really understand you're addressing their pain points via the right communication channels, and you're engaging with them actively to either address this in a timely manner and make this a bit more actionable. So like just as a side element, there are many new ways like you could create a survey. One of the really compelling ways to learn a new skill is to build your own SMS text message survey in Twilio Studio. And what's great about Twilio Studio as we're having this conversation about communications and customer engagement is that you don't have to be a developer to learn how to do this or code. Like you can be super non-technical. It's basically a visual drag and drop interface that lets you basically leverage the Twilio console to create your own survey, enabling you to purchase a phone number, and you can actually build in to Twilio Studio how you can send messages or SMS or just a variety of different solutions to ensure that you're thinking about customer engagement and communications with your customers. Finally, I just really wanted to wrap up with something that Jeff highlighted last year. So Jeff is our CEO of Twilio. And I think what he highlighted, which is the same truth that has guided him and the business then and now, is that you should always follow your customers because that's the truth of where the business is. Even when you have businesses and startups cutting their spending, people are always going to pay for a valuable service up front. And that's how you get customers to pay to get the company going. Really, what this means is focusing on how you choose to engage with your customers. And I just think you really need to always wear their shoes, leverage empathy, and really think about what customer engagement means for you as a founder to ensure you're creating experiences that inspire and create a brighter future as we navigate, all the uncertainty that we're dealing with in these current times. So my name is Frank Yaw-Owusu, as I alluded to earlier. It's been a pleasure presenting to you today. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy now to address them and answer them now. Thank you so much for your time. And if you haven't already, and you are a founder and you're building, I do highly recommend that you apply to the Twilio Startups program, where you'll get access to some free credits and support as well. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, Christine.
Hey, Frank. Is the presentation over?
Yes, the presentation has come to an end. It's finished.
Perfect. So, are you taking any questions?